Welcome in. Reading from a book here talking about Neptune. As Neptune transits into Aries, I figured this would be a good time to get on here and start this reading. And this book is written in 1930. It's called Astrology, Your Place Among the Stars by Evangeline Adams. And she writes, the mind of the Father said into three, and immediately all things were so divided. This oracle, attributed to Zoroaster, refers secondarily to the division of nature into the three active elements of fire, air, and water. Earth is but a mixture of these three in diverse proportions. In this division, according to mythology, the kingdom of fire fell to Hades or Pluto, that of air to Zeus or Jupiter, and that of water to Poseidon or Neptune. Neptune is therefore the lord of the ocean, and especially of that Oceanus, the great river that girdles the whole earth. That's one thing I learned recently, that apparently Neptune rules rivers, or Pisces rules rivers, Cancer rules oceans, and Scorpio rules swamps. I learned that not too long ago, actually, and it makes sense. So she says here one, and she acknowledges that here, especially Neptune is therefore the lord of the ocean, and especially of that great river that girdles the whole earth. One is not wise to laugh as the shallow laugh, as the supposed absurdities of old geography. The earth is not a flat plate, but the solar system is. And on the rim of this plate is that lovely sphere, Neptune, the outpost of the fortress of the sun. So that it was a most happy accident that this planet was called by the name of the lord of Oceanus. Such is the far-off base in the wise and true dreamland of the philosophers, of the palace of our knowledge. Let us see how their strange symbols have been hints of truth, how from the root of poetry has grown the tree of prose. First, consider Neptune as a lonely sentinel patrolling the confines of our camp. Think of the solitude and darkness of that mysterious and eternal journey. What thoughts must bloom? Mystic, austere, romantic, will they not be? What messenger comet may approach from utmost space? The spirit of adventure thrills the blood, frosted as it is by that contact with a space of icy nothingness, save it may be meteors and dark stars. Neptune is always starlit. At its distance from the sun, our Father is hardly bigger than any other star. So Neptune gallops through a night always starlit, with his source of heat and motion too remote to cheer him, but with hope, faith, and love. How spiritual, how star pure must then be the secret thoughts of such a one, the hermit of the solar system. How indomitable, how lonely, how refined must be his moods. So anyone who has Pisces 12th house, Pisces aspects in their chart, this is how you must feel. That's what she's describing here, essentially. Yet there is something in solitude that sets men dreaming. Not always is that dream the starry aspiration of the night vowed to some inaccessible lady. Often there steals through the fairy window of a glint of some fantastic mirth. In lighter moments there is something of the troubadour and even of the Perrault in his melancholy, craving for the inaccessible. For it is not in the Neptunian nature to reach harbor. He longs for love and friendship. Did he gain them, he would retire. For nothing can satisfy that thirst for things infinite. There is no goal attainable. Neptune is man's boundless spirit. Heaven itself is too narrow for his desires. So into his nature comes the fey coquettishness, He becomes conscious of his own anguish, and this is externalized as a love of masquerade. He knows that love is unattainable, and so he plays at love. He knows that happiness is beyond his reach, and so he seeks it by a violation of the limits of existence. His true nature, thrilled through by the wisdom of the stars, with whom he holds such raptured communings in the centuries of that tireless vigil, leads him to mystic trances, to visions of deity, to mysterious marriages with elements beyond our system. For he, the Ishmael of planets, never turns his face toward the sun. Just a little pause here. That kind of something came to mind thinking about Neptune and what she's saying here, that a lot of religious people, if you think they look towards heaven, and I never thought about this, but this actually allows them to live their practical life, because people that aren't religious, or not just religious but spiritual, that look toward the afterlife or see something in the afterlife as something to be attained, as something to look forward to, as being the ultimate, they can live their life in a practical way, and they're not always searching or seeking the unattainable here on earth, because the unattainable that they're seeking is not of the earth. And compare this to people who don't do that. They're constantly, especially with these kind of natures, they're seeking they get high off seeking the unattainable here on earth, and they have no grounding at all. They're all over the place. But if he is not steeled to endure exile, to attain the snowy summits of omniscience and bliss by the means of the wise eremite, then the false nature mocks the true. In revels fantastic and fond, in comedies bitter at the core, in the use of strange drugs or of perverse delights, in soulless and neurotic waking dreams, he seeks to satisfy his soul. And that's exactly what I was mentioning just now that she's talking about here. At least that's what it seems like. Neptune is the soul, and does not this fit the sea? Is not the sea at once infinitely calm and infinitely air-hungered? Does not the sea take strange shapes, break up the light into a myriad fantastically colored flaws? Illusion and art, chameleon and dragon, that is the sea. Now, according to Jeffrey Wolf Green and his Pluto material, Pluto is the soul. But you sometimes hear that Neptune is the soul, but I believe this book would have been written in 1930. I think that's when Neptune was discovered. Is not the sea now tender and adorable, sun-kissed, now terrible in its torment, a whirl of insatiable desires? Did not Sappho fling herself into the sea, and did not Undine draw thence the bitter joy of her veins? Are not the sea's depths unstirred, unplumbed, and do they not harbor monsters more terrible than the fancy of antiquity ever invented? I take the ocean of Ulysses and of Jason. Let the romance and the terror, the mystery and the unearthly joy of all the artists of the world direct your glance. Look upon the sea through their eyes, and draw into your soul the wonder of the wantonness of it. Then understand how proper is the ocean as an image of the soul. How proper is Neptune to be the ruler of the ocean, the soul. Yes, there's the word. Neptune is the soul, with all its naked nerves played upon by rays of alien systems, malicious, capricious, fairy, or else like harp strings swept by some player from beyond, too subtle and too divine for his melodies to reach the ears of mortals. Only that sympathy, that yearning, that otherworldliness in ourselves, that influence of Neptune in our own horoscopes enables us to catch a faraway echo of that lyre, faint, silvery music of the psyche of our inmost beings. So then she goes into Neptune in the signs. There's a little introduction here, which I'll read. And I have Neptune on, I know I've talked about this before. I have Neptune on my south node, moving towards my south node in the 12th. And I actually almost drowned in the ocean at one point. I thought I was probably like 12 years old or 11 or 10 years old. And I was way out there. I was caught in a riptide, and like I had given in. I was like, that's it. It's over. And at that moment, as I said that, a lifeguard came and scooped me up and took me back to the beach. So interesting, at least to me, that's interesting story, or one of the many Neptune-like stories I've had. Neptune in the signs. Not by accident are the planets named for the gods of Greek and Roman mythology. In early times, the sea was not navigable in our modern sense. The voyage of Ulysses from one end of the Mediterranean to the other was considered worthy of celebration in the greatest poem transmitted. Lost my place here. Greatest poem transmitted to us from antiquity. To the ancients, the sea, unknown and terrible, swarming with fabulous and appalling monsters, personified the unknown, and the great river Oceanus, which girdled the earth, was to them bounded by the other side of the gloomy shores of Hades. The dwellers upon the coasts of Greece and Italy, however many of them living in islands, knew the sea in its playful moods, as many gracious legends of Neptune attest. They knew, too, its masquerade of still waters over cruel rock, the treachery of its whirlpool sucking into a vortex of destruction whatever ventured too near its outer sweep. They knew how currents are denied by surface tide. They had heard the measureless laughter of the loud-sounding sea, and had been deafened by its storm, insatiable, murderous, pitiless. And so the ancients named that far strange planet, which girdles the firmament, as the salt sea girdles the earth, Neptune, not by accident, but by mindful of the ways of the sea and of the symbolism of the god that rules the sea. To arrive at the true valuation of Neptune's influence in the signs of the zodiac, and upon the native as he comes under the dominion of the signs, the reader must constantly bear in mind the peculiar nature of the planet, as distinguished from other planets. Whereas Mars, Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, and Saturn exert their influences chiefly upon man in his mundane capacities, his evolutionary life, Neptune exerts a spiritual influence upon man in the midst of the latter's mundane existence. For Neptune is the planet of spiritual forces, of the revolutionary spirit itself. And as she mentions there, Mars, Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, and Saturn exert their influences chiefly upon man in his mundane capacities. The majority of people do not respond to Neptune, not in the way that anyone interested in astrology would likely respond to Neptune. Neptune's influence upon a life dominated wholly or chiefly by physical or materialistic interests is likely to be wholly bad or malefic, while this same influence stressed upon a life already under a spiritual leading will be wholly good or benefic. And then she's kind of mentioning there that Neptune's influence, we would say, on these people, or on most people, would be, who are mostly physical and materialistic, would be bad. So they would definitely choose to ignore things associated with Neptune, unless it has to do with spirituality, or in their case, the church. It is the Neptune influence that gives the wings of vision to humanity in its long struggle out of darkness into light of eternity. It is Neptune's influence that gives the wings of vision to humanity in its long struggle out of darkness into the light of eternity. Materialistic persons can think only in relative values of a day, a month, a year at most. Intellectually developed persons think in values of a lifetime. But those of our sphere who are spiritually conscious think and work in terms of the eternal. To these, a century is a year, a cycle as a life. They are true Neptunians. The materialistic astrologer classes Neptune malefic, sinister, obscure, but the enlightened astrologian thoroughly understands that Neptune causes upon this earth and upon its natives the influx of a spiritual element unrelated to strictly earthly affairs, while the other planets are commensurable and deal with the relative. Neptune is incommensurable. He intrudes the absolute. In other words, for those developed spiritually, Neptune is wholly good. For others, he seems wholly bad. Neptune stirs the soul to aspiration toward the infinite. The result is that a humanitarian influence is projected by the native for the benefit of humanity's advance as a whole. See, from a worldly standpoint, Neptune's effect on me has been simultaneously, well, I say from a worldly standpoint, it's been bad. From a spiritual standpoint, it's been good. If you want to look at it in terms of good and bad, it's not, I don't think it's always one or the other. Like I said, for me, I've seen where there's points where its influence, I shouldn't say its influence, but how I received it, and I didn't really look at it right, and it took me down certain roads that were damaging, I would say, and then vice versa towards things that are uplifting and healing, or just uplifting, I guess is a good word to use. Inspirational. Neptune stirs the soul to aspiration toward the infinite. The result is that a humanitarian influence is projected by the native for the benefit of humanity's advance as a whole. On the other hand, for those whose desires cause them to plunge and wallow in the troughs of mere material delights and satisfactions, the Neptune influence is as a lightning bolt that shatters their temples of materialism to the very foundations. Neptune requires approximately 14 years to move through a single sign. To give an account of his effects upon humanity would be to write the history of the world. So for me, it's like, I think Neptune going into Aries, if you're my age, or if you're like mid 30s to mid 40s, we're talking about like 20. It's been in Pisces since you were 20, 25 ish, and that's a pretty big deal, because I think for me, between 20, 25 and currently, it has been very Pisces-like for me. There's been some moments, but for the most part, I didn't know anything. I was learning so many things, being taken advantage of, drifting, trying all kinds of things, like kind of like a lot of the stuff that she's talking about here. And I'm glad it's over. Like for me specifically, I think that Neptune and Aries should be more intentional, is a good word to use. I don't think I'm going to be as taken advantage of as much, hopefully, as I did when I was younger. One can gauge him to some extent by considering certain events of comparatively recent times. Matters requiring wisdom are usually directed by men of between 45 and 55 years, and the consensus of their influence may be divined from the place of Neptune at their birth. Thus, the revolution of 1848 was brought about by men influenced by Neptune in Libra. They struggled for freedom and justice, but their policy lacked virility. While their methods failed because of indirectness, similarly, the French Revolution was begun by people influenced by Neptune and Leo. But the generations of preparation toward that event involved people with that planet in Cancer or Gemini. Cromwell's Neptune was alas in Leo. The recent Great War was doubtless due to the influence of people born with Neptune and Aries, while the rebuilding of civilization has fallen upon those laborious and initiative men and women for whom Neptune works through Taurus and Gemini. Also, I'm thinking about like kids. I don't know if I'll have any kids in my lifetime, but if I did, I'm looking at Pluto. It makes more sense now or later than from before with Neptune and Aries for myself. Neptune and Aries, Pluto and Aquarius, and then Uranus and Gemini. From an athletic standpoint, from my own background aside from astrology, that makes more sense. Let's see. Scientific advance of the 19th century was due to pioneers stimulated by Neptune and Capricorn, and the fruits of their labors were gathered by men born with Neptune in Aquarius. Neptune was in Pisces, influencing the artistic, psychic, decadent generation of the 90s. And she's talking about the 90s. That would be a long time ago. Times when skeptical thought attacks tradition by purely intellectual methods and makes constructive work possible are those influenced by Neptune and Gemini. Immanuel Kant, who destroyed the old philosophy, Voltaire, who destroyed the old religion, and their contemporaries were of such a generation. It makes me think, it's like I'm thinking of, like I was born with Neptune and Sagittarius, and some people that I know of Neptune and Capricorn, but see, then they'll have Pluto. If they have Pluto and Sagittarius, it's one thing, but to have Pluto in Scorpio and Neptune and Uranus and Capricorn is tough. It's tough for me, I would say. Something I haven't really considered that much reading charts, but let's see. Neptune being the planet of spiritual forces is always revolutionary. Forever he quickens the old life and increases the new life. The principle is the same, only the material varies according to the signs through which he moves. Because of the character of Neptune and the long period of time it requires to pass through a single sign, its influence upon the individual is very dependent upon its position and aspect to other planets. It is therefore obviously unnecessary to go into a lengthy account of its effect upon the individual in the 12 signs. And I'll just read here, she has Neptune and Aries. People having Neptune and Aries are inclined to favor new religious and philosophical teachings. They have a great desire to teach humanity to aspire to higher ideals. It's militant, martial, efficient, temporal, and material for so purely spiritual force as Neptune to express his vibrations sympathetically. Its power lies more in revolution than in evolution, in the destruction of the wrong and the upheaval of the conservative. The position is spiritually radical and inclines the spiritual energies to be more dominantly mental and energetic than deep, emotional, and cosmic. This is well illustrated by the religious diversity as well as the theological skepticism among the men and women of Neptune and Aries generation. No two of them seem to hold the same ideas on any higher matters or on political or social matters. It has produced an age of diversity and unrest, not an age of cohesion and peace, an age in which more old dogmas are destroyed than new truths advanced. When this planet is afflicted in Aries, it lends energy and independence to all its turbid forces for evil. While its mental quality adds initiative and adds a certain intelligence, it then tends to make one fantastical, bolshevistic, and revolutionary. So you can see you think of the Neptune and Aries, it's just like any other time, in the sense that there'll be a general theme. And then, like, you might think of war as being a general theme out of what the things that she's saying. But then, it's not like it's going to be war the whole time. It's when the aspects come, the certain tougher aspects come, just like any other time, there may be wars in the world and mini wars, big wars all over, just like there is any other time. It's just the subject matter might change. So thanks for watching. I'm going to leave you there with that, and have a great night.